Hello, everybody. You're very welcome to this webinar on the BA Honours in Photography and Visual Media. My name is Adrian Riley. I'm a lecturer in photography and currently the co-chair in the photography programme. Joining us here today, we have Dr. Justin Carville, who is also a lecturer on the programme, and Scott Lee, who is a current second-year student on the photography programme as well. Thanks for joining us. What I'm going to do with you today is just take you through an overview of the program that we offer here at IDT. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and my colleague Dr. Carville and Scott Lee will try and answer those as best we can throughout the presentation. Also at the end, when we finish, if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask. And as I said, I'll take you through now the overview of the program and give you an insight into what we do on the photography and visual media program at IDT and some of the reasons behind these things. All right. So you may be aware that we recently have gone through a process of redesigning the program. There is still a large component of the original program there, but what we've tried to do is revamp and refresh the program to meet the new and evolving needs, not just of the photography industry, but also of individual photographers and prospective photographers like yourself. All right. When we think about photography, we all have our own individual relationship to it. We all take photographs all the time. We consume photographs in really an unprecedented level of frequency. And photography is all around us and really makes up much of what we experience about the world. For this reason, photography is a very diverse medium, and what our program aims to do is to engage with each individual photographer and the medium simultaneously to allow you as a photographer to find your own creative voice in relation to photography and the world around us. As a very comprehensive and ubiquitous, all-encompassing medium, photography is sometimes thought of as an individual kind of medium where we use the camera. The reality is that photography as an industry, photography as a creative practice, is an incredibly diverse, rapidly changing and always evolving area of artistic, cultural and social discourse. Photographers have a defining role to play in the way that culture is shaped, both through the images that they make, but also the way in which we make sense of the world as well. The skills of photographers and visual media artists are highly sought after in creative industries. And our program has been designed to allow each individual participant on the program to discover for themselves where their interests lie in relation to photography and the world around them. An overview of the program then, based on this rationale. We don't just produce sort of photographers or equip very specific types of photographers. Our program is, as I said, designed to introduce you to a whole range of different ways of working with the camera, different ways of thinking about images, so that you can find your way in the industry and fashion the path that you wish to take. So over the course of the program, you'll develop a number of skills which are based on photography and the moving images across a range of different contexts, such as the arts, creative industries, communication and critical theory. What this really means is that because photography is something that is, something that the world is increasingly made up of and which increasingly reflects the world, there's a very broad range of kind of individual industries in which photographers are employed, and that's reflected in the ideas of creative artists, of documentarians, of fashion photographers, as people who write and theorize about the medium, but also people who work in newspapers and galleries as picture editors, as curators. So it's a very diverse range of different professions and different jobs that one can go into with a degree in photography. Based on this, on our program and on throughout the course of the 4-year BA Honours program, you'll have access to a broad range of facilities that reflect these different areas of photographic discourse. And they're designed really to allow you to explore and discover which areas most suit you as an individual person, creatively, artistically, intellectually, but also professionally as well. In IADT, we have a range of industry standard equipment and software, and really the 4 years of the program are designed to give you a comprehensive base of a skill set and understanding, so that no matter which area or which field you choose to go into, you'll be familiar and competent in all of those different areas of professional practice. We use, as I said, to enable this to happen when you graduate, a range of industry standard equipment and software, as well as cutting edge digital media laboratories, digital imaging, post-processing, working with Photoshop and so on, but also professional studio lighting equipment and studios on campus, which enable people to go into, traditionally anyway, areas such as fashion and industries where the skill sets of creative fashion photographers and studio photographers are necessary. One of the areas that has been kind of subjected to the most change in recent years perhaps has been in relation to the analog darkroom. We have quite a sort of rich tradition of analog darkroom processes in IADT, and the facilities that we have on campus reflect this, but also reflect the importance that we believe analog photography still holds in a broader spectrum in relation to photography as a medium. So in each one of these 4 bullet points that you can see there on the PowerPoint at the moment, each one of these different areas of practice require different skill sets, the use of different equipment, also the application of different thoughts and different approaches to using the camera and creating images. And each one of these is used and deployed in each year across the 4 years of the program. So that the idea is that by around 2nd year, 3rd year, you've really begun to identify what kind of photographer you are and where you need to start to focus from 2nd year onwards. And really at your disposal are any one or all of these different facilities. To kind of like operating alongside of these quite practical and technical skill sets is obviously engagement with a body of staff, myself, Justin Carville, to name 2, but then also your fellow prospective students. And really, the equipment is nothing without the people who are able to drive and employ and use that equipment. We believe in experimentation, but also learning through communication with others, staff and students alike. The staff body, speaking on their behalf, we all have our own practices as individual photographers, as theorists, as writers, and as a body of staff, we have a range of practices published by exhibitions, publications and so forth, nationally and internationally. And really we think that the environment for learning as a result of this is incredibly rich, and also one that reflects contemporary photography as well. If you go into the industry of photography, you'll find that there are lots of different people with different social, cultural backgrounds, with different ideas about what photography can do and what it's best at. And our body of staff is also accumulated to reflect that diversity as well. Okay, excuse me. So what I'll do now is I'll take you through some visual examples of students at work on campus in the photography spaces throughout the program. One area is professional lighting studios and techniques. So what I spoke about was, you know, the use of portrait photography, of still life photography, and also of fashion photography. In this particular environment, there is a range of very specific photographic equipment and materials, each one of which requires introduction, requires use, experimentation, and then mastery through the production of your own images. The modules that we have on the photography program are designed specifically with the idea of recreating that professional environment on campus. So the briefs that you're set in relation to the production of images are designed and will take place in spaces that replicate what you'll encounter in the real world in the photographic industry. In this particular example, you can see a number of students who are using lighting equipment in one of our studios to light a portrait model that is slightly behind the person holding the reflector. And at different moments, particularly in first and second year, you'll be asked to go into the studio to create various types of work, both portrait-based, but also ones based around, for example, still life and other types of skill sets. Now, the making of the photographs is really the first, well, is really one of the primary moments in the process of producing photographic images. After the photographs have been made, we will ask you to go into, for example, analog black and white darkroom spaces. Again, in this area, you'll encounter a range of different types of equipment and materials and tools which allow you to produce original and interesting images. One of the things that we try and impart to students is the idea that photography is actually a process that is drawn out rather than it being something instantaneous that begins and ends with the click of a camera. Okay, while it's true in some respects to talk about photography as a moment, as to use Cartier-Bresson's phrase, a decisive moment, in reality, what separates a professional photographer from an enthusiast or from an amateur is the awareness of what one wants to create, what you believe a photograph should look like, and then being able to use the equipment to go and produce what was in your mind when you had the idea. So by working across a range of different locations, from studio to darkroom, and then to the submission of work either in project form or on a gallery wall or published on a web page, what we try and do on the program is create an awareness among students that photography is a conceptual, theoretical, idea-based creative practice, one that's informed through doing and making, but also one that very much benefits from research and from thinking about images. How can they be made? How can they be made differently? And what do I need to do to get from idea to finished image? Aside from then the traditional analog darkroom practices, we also, as I mentioned, have a range of digital laboratories where certain post-processing can take place. As I mentioned earlier, one of our kind of key beliefs with regards to photography is that it is an incredibly diverse medium and one that requires a whole range of different skill sets. From my own perspective, one of the things that drew me to photography originally as something that I became interested in, and that I became, I decided that this was more than just an interest. This was something I really wanted to dedicate the vast majority of my time to, was the sense of possibility and opportunity that photography offered me. Photography for me personally was a way that I could communicate how I felt or thought about the world. I had ideas about the world, I still do obviously, had ideas about the world, and I wanted to explore and share those with people through images, through photographic images. I love to make pictures, and I love to make pictures not just in terms of walking around the streets holding a camera and making photographs, but I really enjoy the process that goes into creating a body of work. And in particular, when we teach students about post-production software and the tools at your disposal, it really is in relation to this idea of the larger project, the body of work. So it's not just a question of using Photoshop and other types of editing software to make your images look professional on an individual basis. It's also about being able to think about photography in a more detailed and sustained way that allows you to make large bodies of work on specific subject matter and specific themes. look, again, as I said, we all make images all the time, but often the very nature of just how we encounter photography in our normal everyday sense often means that we think in terms of single images. We see something that interests us, we take a picture, and we move on to the next step. Really, what we encourage students to do, not just on the program, but also in terms of students, prospective students who want to apply to photography, is to try and get them to think in terms of the large body of work. And one of the ways that a group of photographs can be brought together and look coherent is through the use of post-production software tools. Aside from those ideas, there's also the kind of obvious reality that increasingly a detailed range of digital skill sets is absolutely fundamental to any emerging photographer who wants to make their way in the world, professionally speaking. As I mentioned earlier as well, from my own kind of personal perspective, it's really the diversity of photographic processes that is one of the things that is so appealing to me about photography as a medium. In a kind of, you know, from a creative personal sense, you know, we're all individuals. We all have different experiences. We all have a different personal history. We have a different relationship to the world around us. We see the world differently, and we make sense of things differently. And one of the things I think that is very unique about photography is that a bit like us, a bit like myself, it also is incredibly diverse and individualistic. There are as many ways to make photographs and produce bodies of work as there are perspectives on the world, and as there are people who want to communicate what they feel about the world. There's a real connection for me between the individual, the image, and society as a whole. And kind of one of the things that is indicative of this for me really is evident in just the vast range of the ways photographs can look aesthetically, but also what they can be made out of. One of the great things about a creative degree is the amount of uncertainty in a good way, uncertainty around what is possible, what can I do? And photography is a medium that is always expanding in its material possibilities. And one of the things that we really try and encourage students to do is explore these for themselves. And that idea has been very much kind of foregrounded in the ways in which we've designed the program, the different modules that are delivered across the 4 years of the program, to give you, the student, as much opportunity as possible to encounter new things, new ways of working with the camera, new ways of working with the still and moving image, and so forth. Okay, so some of another example of that would be something that is sort of less common nowadays, which is large format photography. There's a nice kind of phrase I often think of when I think about photography as a practice, coined by a gentleman called David Bate, which is photography is always in a state of crisis. What Bate means by this is that photography is always in a process of reinventing itself and outdoing itself. Once upon a time, there was no color photography. When color photography was invented, people believed that was the end of black and white. And what we really know now as well is when digital photography was invented, people believed that that would be the end of traditional analog photography. The reality is that no one photography has replaced any other. And what has happened is the amount of different types of cameras at our disposal to create a vast range of different types of images has just increased over time. And as much as possible, we've tried to replicate and do justice to that range of diversity in types of cameras, in types of images, in photographic processes. The large format photographic modules, which begin in year 2, are a very kind of obvious and explicit example of that. You may have seen from movies or old sort of period dramas, when you see an old photographer from the 1800s who puts a cloak over his or herself, gets behind a very large camera and makes an image that takes a day to come out the other end. And that would be one example of a kind of photography that is very uncommon, is quite difficult to master, but is one really that separates, again, the kind of enthusiast from the professional. It's also one of the things we do on the photography program is we try and get people to slow down their way of making images. You know, as I've mentioned, we all have these devices that we carry around with us. We make an unprecedented number of images all day, every day, and we do it to such an extent now that the amount of time we spend actually in the process of making images has really diminished. We've tried, where possible, using, for example, large format photography to get people really to slow down the act of making photographs. The reason for this is to make images that are hopefully more meaningful, more provocative, more beautiful, although that's a contested word, but also just more engaging and more enjoyable to create. So that's the kind of an introduction to the sort of still image part of the program. One of the areas which has been under recent review, excuse me, has been around the place of the moving image in relation to photography. Any of you who have shot or have shot on a DSLR or a digital single lens reflex camera will know that a camera which is designed to make still photographs also offers you the opportunity to make moving images, to make short videos. The differences and the lines between the still photograph and the moving image is also something that is becoming increasingly blurred, and also each type of medium is becoming increasingly experienced together. So kind of as a result of this, on the program, we've kind of, to reflect the changing practices on a professional level, excuse me, where professional photographers are expected to also have a detailed skill set around the moving image, we've redesigned our program to reflect this change in the industry, and also just in creative and in cultural levels as well. You know, it's obviously no surprise, and it's very easy to kind of recognize that the place of the moving image, the place of videos and videography, and the role of the videographer in creative industries is becoming increasingly important as well, not just to movie makers, but increasingly important to the photographer. And for this reason, we've introduced a number of moving image modules, which really will help photographers to broaden their skill sets and their employability around their uses of the photographic medium. Excuse me. Okay, so the next section then is, okay, so they're the things that we have on the program. That's the rationale behind the way the program is designed and what it's trying to do. The next bit then is, well, how does this learning take place? What do we do to enable students to understand photography, to recognize equipment, and then to begin to use it to create their own images and communicate their own ideas about the world around them? And the short answer is we do this through a range of different approaches. Aside from the traditional, what we call chalk and talk approach, which is the lecture theatre, the classroom, we really have designed the program around participation on the part of the student, particularly in relation not just to their own work, but through talking about and analysing the work of their classmates and of other photographers that they bring in as an example. Photography as a degree and as a medium that produces objects by way of the photograph is a medium that lends itself very naturally and very readily to sharing. You know, the way in which the internet has grown and developed and been shaped has been in large part through the need for us to share images of ourselves and the world around us to other people. Photography is fundamentally a medium of communication, communicating visually through images. And to enable and to facilitate the development of a very kind of, I would say, expertise around our understanding of what photographs look like, why they look that way, but importantly, what they say to the audience. A fundamental component of our teaching practices on the program revolves around group crits, getting you, the student, to present your work, whether it's in the stage of being conceptualized, being thought of, whether you've already made some work but are a couple of weeks away from completion. And the process of sharing work in this way and getting into an environment where there's a community of learners who share their work through what we call group critiques. It's a very kind of fundamental component of the program, and one which I believe also allows students to gain confidence with their work as photographers, to gain confidence around public speaking, but also just to also understand, you know, what is unique about their work. How is it different from the person beside them? What makes, you know, how, for example, a person in your class might be producing work that's vastly different from what you are doing, but actually there's a fundamental connection there that can enrich and enlighten both sets of participants. The only way really for us to do this, and the best way for us to do this, is evident in the example that you can see on your screen now, which is a shot taken from a group critique, I think of third years, where each individual member has been working away on their own individual project for a number of weeks. They've been off shooting, whether that's, you know, on site, outside somewhere on the streets, whether that's in the studio that I showed you an image of earlier. And then every so often, every couple of weeks, we come together as a group, we check in with each other, we share the work that we've made to date. We get students to consider and to talk to the group about what their work is based off, what they're hoping to do with it. And then everyone pitches in and gives their own insights and talks about their own reception of the images, what they see as being successful, what recommendations or advice they might have. And it really kind of brings together the different students on the program, and there's often a very you know, they're often like very interesting and very enriching experiences. When you have a group of people, 25, 30 people, who all share an interest in photography, but are all very different people with very different backgrounds and very different ideas and projects, what you get is a really interesting and a really diverse conversation, and really a sense of belonging to a group of something, while at the same time retaining that sense of individualism and who you are. So group critiques, presenting and editing photographic projects, is really a fundamental component of the program that runs throughout the 4 years. In line with this, then, aside from the kind of, let's say, individual modules where you are asked to identify your own project, your own area of interest, and essentially kind of individually go about creating that body of work, we also contrast this, let's say, sort of free approach with much more specific and individually tailored modules as well. For example, in relation to fashion and advertising, and we tend to call these, or think of these, as industry-focused projects. The reality is, for the individual photographer in contemporary society, you will often have to work to a brief. You'll often need to produce images which cater to somebody else's ideas, which you are being asked to produce for them. And producing something in line with a brief is actually a very different technique and requires a very different approach to being just told, you know, go forth and photograph. So the modules we have on the program are also considered specifically with this, with these differences in mind. Kind of when we begin to moved more into third year, and students have had a real opportunity to explore a range of different photographic processes, different techniques, different skill sets, and so on. Going into third year, one of the areas that becomes of real focus is around photography and identity, and ways to research and understand and access photographs through research, through academic studies, and through critical theory as well. One particular area centers around photography and identity. The image that you can see on the screen at the moment, the gentleman you see who was photographed in 1920, that's my grandfather from Holland. It's kind of a bit weird, to be honest, how alike I am. Looking at this man I never met, but who I'm named after. And one of the things that this particular photograph does to me, for me on an individual level, aside from any other family photographs, is it, on one level, it enriches my sense of self and my sense of who I am. I never met this individual, but I'm named after this individual. So the photograph in this case, quite interestingly, confirms and supports and enriches my identity, my sense of self, my sense of who I am. But at the same time, it also reveals the separation that I have from that person, and the sense that I belong to something, a family history, a cultural, national history, but at the same time, I'm somehow not really a part of it. It's a bit like looking at a photograph where it's me, but it's not me. Aside from that individual, very individual kind of response and example of the image, throughout its history, photography has been used as a fundamental vehicle through which identity has been expressed, has been contested, has been confirmed, and has also been used as a way to kind of standardize individuals as well. My colleague, Dr. Justin Carville, who is assigned as the question taker for this particular webinar, is really the expert in relation to photography and identity. I don't want to speak on his behalf, and I won't be able to speak in a way perhaps that does his area of expertise justice. But you know, one of the things that is very apparent about photography is photographs are used not just to reflect the world, but also to manifest and create the world around us as well. That happens not just through the production of physical images, but it also happens in the case where photographs are used to produce cultures, to produce identities, to produce ways of looking at people. And it's the way that photography can be used to create and confirm, but also deny identity, that is really a fundamental and increasingly important component of contemporary photographic discourse. Okay, that kind of brings us up really to about the end of third year. The slide that you can see here at the moment is a recent slide of work by one of our recently graduated students, Jailin Long. Her work, which deals also with identity, has received quite a lot of critical acclaim over recent months. And the image that you can see here of the child with the salute is one that has won a number of awards in the photographic industry nationally over the last couple of months. This particular body of work which Jailin produced, the original ideas for this work really came out of those modules I spoke about, which are part of third year, that Justin Carville is part of the team who delivers this area. When we get into fourth year, although we still have three modules in fourth year, unlike the rest of the program, I don't mean entirely, but unlike a component of the program up until fourth year is really the place where you've been introduced to all the different ideas. You've used a whole range of different equipment. You've experimented. You've tried and failed and got things wrong and redid it and got things right. And also you've learned along the way in the 3 years who you are, what you're about, and what your photography is, which enables you to explore and express yourself. So based on that, 4th year is really the point in the program where the scaffold comes down, the reins are off, and students are free to really identify and explore and manifest their own professional practices. This image that you can see here, as I said, was an image that Jai Lin began to think about and identify as a result of the photography and identities module in 3rd year that Justin teaches. And this became the focus of her entire 4th year work. By the time you get into 4th year, you have a very broad knowledge of a whole range of different photographic principles, practices, and theories and ideas. And really, 4th year is the opportunity for you to choose the area that interests you the most, where you feel your own strengths lie individually, and decide what you want to do with the year ahead and what you want to leave the course with. The 4th year of the program is really the part of the program where there is a transition between being a student of photography and being a professional photographer in your own right. And the modules that are deployed, particularly in 4th year, enable students to create the platform for their career that they want to launch, regardless of what area in photographic industries it is. And a couple of ways we do this, and a couple of ways that these can be done, is through the production of photographic bodies of work, and the designing and the producing of photo books. In 4th year, one of the things that happens is a number of the different projects and skills that you've learned along the way come together in the final year to enable you to create a body of work that is, represents not just who you are, your style as a photographer, your interests as a photographer, but also demonstrate the professional level of skills that you've amassed throughout the program. This is done through public exhibition. It's also done through the production of a thesis, a dissertation, and it's also done as well through the production of what we call traditionally the photo book. Because of the kind of, the different ways in which photography can be encountered, whether it's on a gallery wall, in a newspaper, on a website, or in an article, one of the things that 4th year students are encouraged to do is to try and express and resolve their individual studies and their individual projects through different means. The public exhibition on the gallery wall, the photo book, but then also through a kind of a very reasoned sort of theoretical exploration of the ideas of photography and how photography can be understood historically, conceptually, and so on. Aside from these very kind of this sort of formal approach to the program, and also just so that you don't become too accustomed to individual ways of thinking about photography, we make sure to include visiting lecturers internationally. This has obviously become increasingly possible and important through digital technologies, where we invite people from a range of different positions within the photographic industry to come and talk to students and to talk to staff about their experience of photography as an industry professional. One of the things about this is it really enriches the experience, not just for students, but also for us as staff, to enable us to encounter and to be introduced to new concepts, diverse perspectives on photography. At the end of the day, as individual as photography is, it's also a very global, a very modern industry. And on the island of Ireland, rather, we have our own sort of relationship to photography and how we think about photography, and there is also a very Irish industry. So it's really important that we learn from other countries, from people of other nationalities and other communities, about how their photographic industry operates, what their work is and how it reflects that. Okay, so just a very quick sort of recap, because I'm just conscious of time. I'll just take you through some more slides now, which document some of the work that's been produced by students throughout the 4 years of the program that I've just spoken about. This example here is from critical studies around ideas of landscape. The idea here is to get students to research photographs, articles, writings around the landscape, and to create a research project based on this. In this particular example, students were put into groups. Each student was given a particular theme that they had to explore, and were then kind of given free rein to individually identify research, and then through group crits and seminars, we pieced together a whole range of different perspectives. The idea behind this approach is that you learn yourself through your own doing, but then when we come together as a group later on, you also learn from the work of others, and it can be a very enriching experience. Here's a shot from the Year 2 exhibition. At the end of Year 2, students have what is technically considered to be their first public exhibition. It's a real milestone for many people. Quite often at the end of second year, really at this stage, the pace of change and the pace of learning is really significant. And the end of second year really marks a midpoint in the program, but also it's a point at which a certain level of technical as well as creative skills and theoretical skills have been mastered, if you like. So it's a real chance to show off just how far people have come. So in this example, there's a lecturer and a member of the student body, and they're really assessing the individual photographs that are going to go on the wall, and laying them out before they commit to what we call the installation on the wall itself. So again, as photographers, we make lots of decisions along the way. The very last decision we make, particularly in relation to the exhibition, is how does this go on the wall? What order do I put them in? What kinds of layouts are at my disposal, and so on. This photograph is taken from a Year 3 module where students work in pairs. Each student is given a particular theme around photography and identity. One student makes the photograph, and then it is the job of another student in pairs to work with the photographer to oversee the installation of the work. Although photography is a very individualistic medium, it also requires working with people. This wasn't something I realized until I really began to study photography. So what you see here is basically a group critique of a corridor installation of the photographer as curator module. Here's a couple of examples from a moving image module from a student project. These are a couple of video stills from the project Femininity by Brigitte Stankovic. Yeah, one of the things we also do, as I said, in this program is we have made the use of the moving image a very kind of strong component of the degree overall. Finally, then, we have the Year 4 BA Honours project. Here's a photograph of the installation of the exhibition from last year. This particular project, Nuances, is from Shauna Kinchela's work. One of the things that may have been apparent to you as I've gone through these different slides over the course of the last 40 minutes has been the way in which the photographs of the work has gone from being kind of consequential and individual to being something that looks very professional and very polished, like this fourth year exhibition space does. This slideshow has really been an attempt to kind of demonstrate the journey made from entry to graduation, one where individuals like yourselves learn a vast amount of skills around photography as a medium, which take you from somebody with a very keen interest in photography to somebody who is really a professional. And that is what the program has been designed to do. So what it kind of allows, as well as the understanding that between this and this is the work that goes on behind it. So just some other shots of examples of fourth year installation of exhibition. One of the things you'll see from this is just the differences between the different approaches. Some very clean, clinical, considered aesthetic work, some that's much more informal, and one that fuses together the space of the installation, the use of photography, and the use of the moving image. In relation to application then, there is a range of information on the website regarding portfolio preparation and portfolio submission. You can access that on iadt.ie. If you have any questions around submission of portfolio around the project days that are coming up, please feel free to email me. My email is adrian.riley@iadt.ie. You can also find that on the website as well. Right? But just to answer some questions quickly, I'll run through the photography portfolio and what's entailed. Again, you can find this information in a range of ways on the website, through the BA Honours in Photography Facebook page, contacting staff directly. We also have a couple of publications as well, which can be distributed. Okay, but the main thing is, and as I've tried to communicate to you throughout the last 44 minutes or so, is the idea that your portfolio should represent you and your interest in photography and visual media. And really that is the thing to kind of focus on. Try not to think so much about what will we want to look at. Really, it's about what you want to show us. So your portfolio really should reflect yourself as an individual, your interests, and your creative self as well. As I mentioned earlier, think of your portfolio as a collection of work that showcases your interests and your talents. Preparing a portfolio should really be an exciting and a thoughtful process. It should be something you enjoy, and also, you know, as I kind of said earlier, there are an infinite amount of single images in the world already. Your portfolio should really try to use photography in a more sustained way, and by that I mean show us a number of photographs grouped together around a particular theme or a particular idea. This can be a particular place, it can be a group of portraits that are related, a group of landscapes that are related, or whatever it is. But try and frame your work around the idea of the project and of the theme. We do like to see photographs in portfolios that demonstrate visual skill, your creativity, your ability to have an idea, to go to work to realize that idea, self-motivation, your inventiveness. One of the joys of photography as well is, you know, despite all of the rules, there are no rules. So please experiment, try things, and be flexible in your approach, and try and show us a range of different types of photographs: black and white, color, portfolio, landscape, street photography, and so on. Really, the work should be well presented. It should show your level of understanding of composition, light, texture, and form when creating images. For 2021, there is an online process because of current circumstances. The requirement is still 20 to 30 images. You're encouraged to prepare a brief statement explaining your interest in photography, what interests you, why are you interested, what do you want to do with images. It's also important to include work that illustrates your level of experience to date. All right, so provide any examples of work published, whether it's in a school magazine, on a website somewhere. anything like that that shows us the range of photography that you've begun to make at this stage in your interest. As I said earlier, try and group the work into projects rather than just having a range of individual images. One of the things that I've spoken about throughout this presentation has also been around the importance of seeing photography as a process. Throughout the program, we place quite a lot of importance on the role that research has to play. So, you know, one of the things that is really important in your portfolio submission is the presence of what we call a visual journal. There are a number of examples of this online as well. And again, if you have any questions around this particular area of what a journal is, either myself through email, Scott, who's the student ambassador for today, can talk to you a bit about what is important in a visual research journal. But essentially, it should be a place to document and experiment your thoughts and ideas and responses, not just to your own photographs, but also to photographs that you see as being inspirational or important. For any more detailed information on these particulars of the submission, as I said earlier, you can check out the IDT website. There's a link there on the screen for you at the moment. At this stage of the year, we make it quite easy to find on the website, and that will direct you to any specific questions around portfolio as well. You can also, if you want to stay in the loop about what we're doing on campus, having a look at what students are producing in the program, you can follow us on the BA Honours in Photography IADT Facebook page, and also as well via Twitter at BA Photo IADT. All right. If you have any questions, as I've said already, please email me or my co-chair colleague Martin.Healy. And again, feel free to ask any questions and chat here on the webinar. And do please also keep in the loop if you are interested in applying for photography. As I said, stay with us on the Facebook page, Twitter, keep up to date, check on the website regularly. There will be more information being rolled out via these 3 different platforms in the coming weeks, particularly in relation to CAO applications and also in relation to what we call the online project days, which are coming up in February, right? Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for listening and thanks for joining us. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to type them into the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them as best as we can. All right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. We've had a couple of questions in so far, so I'm just going to try and group some of these together. So we've had a question about submission of material for application. So the portfolio assessment date is the 18th of March. And then any materials you need to submit through the CAO can be done currently. So the CAO is currently open and you can submit those materials at any time. If you have any questions about that, you can look at the Institute website. So there's lots of details there, but also you can email the admissions. So the admissions email address is admissions@iadt.ie. And if you have any specific queries, you can address those to there. We were also asked a question about QQI courses, further education courses, and whether, I think the question was asking whether there was kind of preference given for those students. The answer to that is for first year, no. The application process is through the CAO and then through the portfolio review. And then obviously if students have additional qualifications, they're taken into consideration as well, and also mature students get additional points for their application. We do have some students who are doing further education courses may occasionally apply for direct entry. That will be at a later date through the CAO, and generally those students would be asked to attend for interview under normal circumstances. We're not sure what will happen this year, but there will be a kind of further assessment process around work if you were applying for direct entry into the second year of the program. We have a question about work placements or internships. Yes, there will, as Adrian said, we have recently redesigned the program. And as part of that redesign, there will be in year 3 a module devoted to either a work placement or internship at some institution or a professional practice project. So students in consultation with staff would be able to maybe perhaps work on a project and do that during that period of time. During that period as well, you would also be asked to come on campus, possibly for 1 or 2 days a week, even while you're doing work placement. This is just to make sure that what the research has shown us is that if the students tend to kind of go off for a whole semester, they tend to kind of struggle a bit coming back to adjust to campus life and kind of working to deadlines for projects and things like that. So the intention would be that you'll still maintain some contact with the program during your placement. And then another question was, what is the project days? So there should be some information. Adrian has talked about that, but project days are designed to give students a little bit of a taste of third level education. We've done different things over the years with this, but sometimes we would ask students to work on a particular project and to come on campus and meet staff. I'd imagine that will be done remotely this year. But it gives students an opportunity to present some work to the staff and students. You can get some feedback on the type of photographic work that they're producing in preparation for their portfolio. I don't have any other questions that have come in. But I think Adrian has kind of covered most of everything that you want to ask questions on. But is there any other questions people might have? Okay, nothing's coming up there. Maybe Scott wants to speak briefly.
Hi. I've no questions coming in at the moment, but feel free to send any questions regarding student life on campus and stuff, our point of view as students in this course. Feel free to shoot them my way.
Okay, there's a question here is, can I apply for the photography and film course at the same time? At the end, just pick one. Yes, so you, through the CAO, you'll give your preferences. Your first preference to, I don't know how many is currently on the CAO, how many preferences you're allowed. And then if you were offered a place in your first preference and also offered, a place for your second preference, you would have the opportunity then to decide which offer you would like to take. Adrian, here's a question for what is meant by visual media?
That's a very open-ended question. There's a couple of ways to answer that. On one level, photography is visual media. Okay, the idea of the visual is kind of self-explanatory. It's things that we see and that we look at. Right? The idea of the visual is also, things that represent other things, whether this is paintings, photography, and so on. The idea of media, then, for something to be media means or suggests that it exists between two things. It's in the middle. It mediates. So photography really is visual media on one level. At the same time, though, visual media specifically has, in recent time, has come to mean a range of different types of practices. For example, videography. Visual media is one of those things that is, for example, it's visual media would be television production, would also be, platforms and applications like TikTok, like Snapchat, the use of stills cameras to make moving images. Streaming is visual media. Really, it's a very broad term that means different things to different people. The best way to try and kind of answer the question really is in relation to this particular BA Honours degree. It's technologies that are used to make images of the world and the world around us and communicate something about that world through images. And that's really, to me, what visual media is. So it's a little bit of the moving image would be an example of visual media. And we use the term on the program, in the name of the program, to encapsulate the fact that nowadays photography is such a diverse and divergent practice that it really isn't just about the single, still, unmoving image anymore. It's about a lot more than that. Photography as an industry is connected to a range of different technology, a range of different ways of using images, whether that's on your phone, on your computer, television, whatever it happens to be. All of these different processes are or fall under the umbrella term of visual media. So I hope that answers the question to some degree. It's a good question. It's one that people will have different answers for. Personally, because it is so diverse, that's my way of thinking about it. So I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, we've no more questions there so far. So we are just at 6 o'clock.
Yep. Okay, I think we'll draw proceedings to a close. Again, if you do have any more questions, if any come to mind later on.
So I just got a question. So I just got a couple of questions have come in here. So I'll take them in order. What's the day in the life of a photography student like? So Scott, over to you.
It's an interesting question. Obviously, with the current pandemic going on, it's changed a lot this year, but it changes every week. You do have your schedules set out, which with each term and each semester to plan out differently. But in general, you're given a lot of free time to work on your projects and your research and your individual work that you have to complete or get that project done. But most of the time, outside the few classes that you have, it's very free for you to go and pursue the work you want to produce. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. I have a question here about portfolios. There's two, so I'll take those together. One's asked, is moving image work a proper portfolio? Yes, in combination with still photographs. Given now that there is a component now of the program that's specifically about moving image. Not everybody necessarily has to include moving image. But you can certainly, even in the past, we have had students the last number of years who've submitted short films and things like that they've produced, or documentaries as part of their portfolio. There was another question about what we need in our portfolio. I think Adrian covered a lot of that, but generally 20 to 30 images. a range of material that shows your breadth of interest in photography, but we also like to see things like examples of project work. So rather than 20 to 30 very separate images, maybe some groupings of small projects that might be 5 photographs in a series or something like that, or to show that you've maybe done kind of some sustained work on a theme or a project. Okay, these are not coming in order for some reason. Someone said that we do video work. We've answered that, I think. In terms of sort of production, if we're thinking about film production, we wouldn't be doing moving image on that scale, though we have had students who've produced short films. So actually, one of the students that Adrian talked about, Adrian Vochas, actually produced a film while he was a student, which won the Film and Media Student Awards a number of years ago. So he did produce quite a, I suppose, might describe as a low budget short film production. Okay. I think that's it. I don't see any other questions there. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. Thanks again very much, everybody, and look forward to hearing from you soon.
Okay, take care, everyone.